Michael Bublé received approximately 4,000 fan letters per month. They arrived in boxes at his management office in Los Angeles, sorted by his assistant Rachel Morrison into categories: requests for autographs, concert feedback, personal stories, business inquiries, and the occasional concerning message that required security review. Michael never read them, not personally, not anymore. In the early days when he was still playing small clubs and wedding receptions, he'd read every letter, treasured every kind word. A handwritten note from someone who'd been moved by his performance meant everything when audiences were small and success felt uncertain. But success had made that impossible. 4,000 letters a month meant 133 letters per day. Even if he spent just 2 minutes on each one, that would be 4.5 hours of daily reading, time he didn't have between recording, touring, interviews, and trying to maintain some semblance of normal life. So Rachel read them. She responded to the ones that needed responses, flagged the ones that seemed important, and filed the rest. It was efficient, professional, the way celebrity correspondence had to work at scale. Michael felt guilty about it sometimes. These were real people taking time to share their thoughts with him. But there were only so many hours in a day, and reading 4,000 letters per month simply wasn't sustainable. But on a Tuesday afternoon in October 2008, Rachel walked into Michael's home office holding a manila envelope with an expression he'd never seen on her face before. "You need to read this one yourself," she said quietly. Michael looked up from his laptop. "What is it?" "It's addressed to you, but it's not really for you, and it's from 1959. Michael's confusion must have shown on his face because Rachel set the envelope on his desk and stepped back. "Just read it," she said. "I'll wait outside." The envelope was old, not vintage aesthetic old, but genuinely aged, yellowed paper, corners softened by decades of handling, the kind of deterioration that can't be faked. The address was written in careful cursive: to the grandson of Demetrio Santaga, see/O Michael Bublé Management. Michael's breath caught. His grandfather Demetrio had died in 2010. 2 years ago, the grief was still fresh enough that seeing his name in someone else's handwriting felt like a small wound reopening. He'd been at Demetrio's bedside when he passed, had held his hand, had watched the man who taught him to love music take his final breath, and now here was Demetrio's name on an envelope that looked older than Michael himself. Inside the envelope were 2 items: a letter on lined notebook paper, also yellowed with age, and a newer letter on plain white stationery. Michael started with the new letter. "Dear Mr. Bublé, my name is Beverly Crane. I'm 73 years old and I live in Vancouver. In 1959, I worked as a waitress at a small jazz club called the Blue Note. It's long gone now, torn down in 1987 to build a parking garage. Your grandfather, Demetrio Santaga, worked there as a plumber. He fixed our pipes, our heating, whatever broke. He was kind, always had a smile, and he loved music more than anyone I'd ever met. One night in November 1959, after closing, I found him sitting alone in the empty club, writing a letter. He looked sad. I asked if he was okay. He said he was writing to his son, your father, Louis, but didn't know if he should send it. I told him that words worth writing were words worth sending. He smiled and said maybe I was right. Then he left the letter on the bar and never came back for it. I kept it. I don't know why. Maybe I thought he'd return. Maybe I just liked the idea that somewhere there was a letter waiting to find its home. I saw you on television recently, performing. And I realized you're Demetrio's grandson. The letter was meant for your father, but your father is Demetrio's son, and you are Demetrio's legacy. So maybe this letter was always meant for you. I'm 73 now. I won't be around forever. This letter deserves to find its family before I'm gone. With warm regards, Beverly Crane. Michael sat very still for a moment, processing. Then he picked up the second letter, the one his grandfather had written 49 years ago. The handwriting was shaky but deliberate, written in the same cursive style Michael had seen on birthday cards and Christmas notes throughout his childhood. November 14, 1959. Dear Louis, I'm writing this at the Blue Note after everyone's gone home. There's still music in the air, even though the musicians left hours ago. That's the thing about music, it lingers. You're only 8 years old right now, sleeping at home while your mother reads her book in the living room. You don't know it yet, but you're going to love music. I can already see it in the way you stop whatever you're doing when you hear a song you like, the way you tap your feet without realizing. Your mother worries about that. She wants you to have a practical life, a stable job, security. She's not wrong to want those things for you. The world is hard, money matters, safety matters, but I need to tell you something, and I'm writing it down so that even if I never have the courage to say it out loud, maybe someday you'll find this and know it's true. If music makes you happy, never let go of it. I've spent my whole life fixing other people's pipes and furnaces. It's honest work, it pays the bills, but it's not what makes me feel alive. What makes me feel alive is standing in this empty club at 2 a.m., listening to the ghost of music that was played here hours ago. I gave up my own music years ago because I thought I had to. I thought being a man meant choosing responsibility over joy. I thought happiness was a luxury I couldn't afford. I was wrong. Happiness isn't a luxury. It's the only thing that makes all the hard parts bearable, and if you're lucky enough to find something that makes you genuinely happy, not just entertained, not just distracted, but truly deeply happy, then you have a responsibility to hold on to it. So here's what I want you to know, Lewis. When you're older, people will tell you to be realistic, to have a backup plan, to choose security over dreams. They'll tell you that passion is for young people and responsibility is for adults. They'll make you feel selfish for wanting to do something just because it brings you joy. Don't listen to them. Chase what makes you happy. Chase it with everything you have, because I didn't, and I've spent 40 years wondering what my life might have looked like if I'd been brave enough to try. If music calls to you, answer it. If something else calls to you, answer that instead. But whatever you do, don't spend your life fixing other people's pipes while your own heart stays broken. I love you, I'm proud of you, and I hope you have the courage I never did. Your father, Demetrio. Michael read the letter 3 times. Then he put it down on his desk and sat in complete silence, staring at his grandfather's handwriting. Demetrio had died 2 years ago without ever knowing that his grandson had become exactly what this letter described. Without knowing that Michael had chased music with everything he had. Without knowing that his own unfulfilled dreams had somehow been passed down through blood and manifested in a grandchild who'd built his entire life around the thing Demetrio had given up. Or maybe he had known. Maybe that's why he'd been so supportive. Why he'd encouraged Michael when others had told him to be practical. Why he'd built that little stage in his basement and made Michael practice until he got it right. Demetrio hadn't just been supporting his grandson. He'd been living vicariously through him, healing his own regret by watching Michael do what he'd never done himself. Michael picked up his phone and texted Rachel, "Get me Beverly Crane's address and phone number." 3 days later, Michael flew to Vancouver. No publicity, no cameras. Just him carrying a small gift bag, knocking on the door of a modest bungalow in East Vancouver. Beverly Crane answered. She was smaller than he'd imagined, with white hair pulled back in a neat bun and eyes that still sparkled with the sharpness of someone who'd spent decades observing people. "Mr. Bublé," she said, smiling, "you didn't have to come all this way." "Yes, I did," Michael said. "May I come in?" Beverly's home was filled with photographs, children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, 73 years of life documented on walls and shelves. She made tea and they sat in her living room while Michael tried to figure out how to thank someone for holding on to a letter for 49 years. "Why did you keep it?" he finally asked. "For so long." Beverly thought about that. "I'm not entirely sure. At first, I thought Demetrio would come back for it. But days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months. Eventually, I couldn't throw it away. It felt wrong, like destroying someone's heart." "Did you read it?" "Once, the night I found it. I know I shouldn't have, but I was curious." She smiled sadly. "It made me cry, such honesty, such regret. I thought, someday this letter needs to find the person who needs." "Ost, my father," Michael said. "Perhaps, or perhaps you." Beverly looked at him carefully. Demetrio wrote about his son, but he was really writing about himself, about his own lost dreams. And you, Mr. Bublé, you're living the dream he lost. That makes you the real recipient, doesn't it? Michael hadn't thought about it that way, but she was right. The letter wasn't advice to his father. It was a warning, a plea, a declaration of regret disguised as guidance. "I brought you something," Michael said, reaching into the gift bag. He pulled out a vinyl record, his first album signed. Beverly looked delighted. "Oh, I have a record player, my late husband's. I haven't used it in years, but not just the record," Michael interrupted gently. He pulled out an envelope. "This is for you." Inside was a check, not an enormous amount, but enough to make Beverly's eyes widen. "Mr. Bublé, I can't accept. You kept my grandfather's heart safe for 49 years, Michael said. "You could have thrown it away. You could have forgotten about it, but you didn't. You protected his words until they could find their way home. That deserves more than just thank you." Beverly's hands trembled as she held the check. "This is too generous." My grandfather wrote that letter in November 1959. I was born in September 1975. 16 years later, he wrote those words before I existed, but somehow they were always meant for me. You made sure they arrived. That's not generosity. That's paying a debt. They talked for 2 hours. Beverly told stories about the Blue Note, about the musicians who'd played there, about Demetrio fixing a pipe. While humming along to the jazz standards floating through the club, Michael told her about his career, about the basement stage Demetrio had built, about how his grandfather had been his biggest supporter. He knew, Beverly said softly, maybe not consciously, but somewhere in his heart he knew that keeping you connected to music was important. He was making sure you didn't make his mistake. When Michael finally left, Beverly walked him to the door. "Thank you for bringing that letter home," she said. "Thank you for keeping it safe." Michael returned to Lowe's Angels, but the letter stayed with him. He had it professionally preserved, sealed in archival quality materials that would protect it from further aging. He kept it in his home office, in a frame on the wall where he could see it every day. And every time he felt tired or questioned whether the touring was worth it, or wondered if he should slow down and choose something easier, he'd look at that letter and remember, if music makes you happy, never let go of it. His grandfather had written those words in regret, but Michael would live them in fulfillment. 6 months after receiving the letter, Michael dedicated an entire concert to his grandfather's memory. He didn't explain why to the audience. He didn't tell the story. But before singing Home, he said simply, "This one's for Demetrio, who taught me that happiness isn't a luxury, it's the only thing that makes the hard parts bearable." The audience applauded, having no idea what those words really meant. Beverly Crane watched that concert on television from her home in Vancouver. She smiled, recognizing the truth in Michael's dedication. The letter had found its home. Words had found their purpose, and somewhere she believed Demetrio was watching too, finally at peace, finally seeing his unfulfilled dreams living fully in the grandson who'd inherited his love of music but not his fear of pursuing it. In 2015, Beverly passed away at the age of 80. Her obituary mentioned her years working at the Blue Note, her children and grandchildren, and at Michael's request, the fact that she'd been a guardian of words that needed to find their way home. Michael attended her funeral, quietly, without fanfare. He sat in the back of the small chapel and listened as Beverly's family told stories about a woman who'd spent her life paying attention to small kindnesses and protecting things that mattered. After the service, Beverly's daughter approached him. "My mother talked about you," she said. "About the letter." She said it was one of the most important things she'd ever done, making sure those words reached you. "She changed my life," Michael said honestly. "That letter reminded me why I do what I do. It gave me permission to keep choosing happiness even when it's hard." Beverly's daughter smiled. She would have loved hearing that. She always said the best gifts are the ones you give without expecting anything back. Michael thought about that on the flight home. Beverly had held onto a letter for 49 years. She'd tracked down a celebrity she'd never met to deliver words written by a plumber she'd known 6 decades ago. She'd done it expecting nothing, asking for nothing, simply because she believed the words deserved to find their home. And in doing so, she'd given Michael something priceless, proof that his life had meaning beyond commercial success, that by choosing music, he was honoring not just his own happiness but his grandfather's unfulfilled dreams, that every time he sang, he was healing a regret that had outlived the man who'd felt it. The letter still hangs in Michael's office. Visitors sometimes ask about it, and Michael tells them it's from his grandfather. He doesn't usually elaborate. The full story feels too personal to share casually. But on difficult days, when the industry feels exhausting, when touring feels like too much, when he questions whether any of it matters, Michael reads that letter again. If music makes you happy, never let go of it. And he doesn't, not for fame, not for money, not for applause, but for the 8-year-old boy his father once was, sleeping peacefully while his own father wrote words of regret in an empty jazz club. For the grandfather who'd built a basement stage and insisted on practice and discipline and excellence, not because he was strict, but because he was making sure his grandson had the courage he'd never found. For the waitress who'd protected a stranger's heart for half a century, believing that words worth writing were words worth delivering. And for himself, the man who'd been given a gift he never knew he needed, permission from the past to keep choosing joy in the present. Some fan letters get filed away and forgotten. Others wait 49 years to change a life. Michael Bublé received 4,000 fan letters per month, but he only needed to read one.